Now, one of the things that the problems when we talk about getting along really deals with personalities. There's so many different personalities you have to deal with, and when somebody doesn't see the world the way you do, what happens? They think you're difficult. They think you have a problem in that area. And let me ask you this, just by a show of hands, how many of you have ever dealt with somebody difficult in this room? Okay, so, okay, let me ask you another question. How many are difficult? Boy, this is tough. I'm going to get out of here now. It's looking a little dangerous. And how many of you realize, you got double hands back there, I saw somebody. How many of you realize that some of the things you do cause other people to be difficult? Okay, we have a bad day, we're in a bad mood and stuff like that. And the point is, people are not necessarily difficult, they're what? Anybody want to yell that out? They're difficult, they're aggressive, they're obnoxious. Okay, that's not the answer I'm looking for. They're different. Yeah, people are not necessarily difficult, but they're what? They're different. And the key is, as I said, from a work perspective, people are always judging you by these areas. I had an opportunity to do some work for a company called Agilent Technologies. They're out in California. And after my presentation, I sat down with the president, and I had to write this on a napkin because I said, what's the key to working together and getting along? And he said this. I thought this was an interesting quote. He said, 50% of all our obstacles to success center around team dynamics. But then he said this, he said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what that means, it's not different cultures from different countries, but if you don't get along, or if I don't get along with you, or you don't get along with me, guess what? We're not going to work. You can have all the plans, the strategies, everything you want, and nothing's going to happen until you work on those other issues that come about. So to help you in that area, what I'd like to recommend, there's a phrase I put in one of my books here. It's called, what is your rule book? And what your rule book means that we've sort of talked about this, but everybody sees things through different lenses. We all have different realities about how life should be. And if somebody doesn't follow those guidelines, there's trouble with them. So we've got to look at our shoulds and should nots that get in the way of doing things. And what I'd like you to do, what I'm going to do real quickly, I just want to read something to you. And I want you to think about this because I want you to check out your own rule book. And by the way, one thing I would recommend on this too is check out your own rule book and see where the shoulds or your ego getting in the way of you doing things. So just listen to this real quickly. It says, we each have an invisible edition of our personal rule book deeply ingrained in our brains. These guidelines define our expectations, desires, how others should treat us, what we believe is right, fair, and just, and how the world and its people should behave. We judge people by our book. We have rules about being courteous, extending appreciation, acknowledging work, honoring time, demonstrating concern, being compassionate, delivering service, and the degree of effort required for projects. We have rules about how fast people should return phone calls and emails, reply to requests, respond with answers, handle problems, pitch in on projects, and most importantly, what people generally should do and what they shouldn't. The rules all serve as our indivisible code of conduct with expectations of reciprocal exchange or else. So if somebody doesn't do the same thing that you think the way it should be, that's when we get into trouble. So I want you to take a good look at your rule book and where is your shoulds, your ego, your should nots getting in the way of you being successful. By the way, if you want a less stressful life too, what happens? You start this, you don't get stressed out on anybody anymore, which is one of the keys that we're looking for today. So to help you with this, although there are going to be people who annoy you and get in your way and you have problems with all the time, but to be less stressful, what I'd like to recommend is I look at people as little kids. For example, everybody, and I don't mean to psychoanalyze anybody here, but I have that kind of background, but when you were 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, you were fed certain messages from your parents, your ministers, your teachers, all these people messages, and now when you're working in the work world, you're doing what? You're coming across with those messages to other people. When they don't do the things you do, we get into trouble, and this gets into conflicts and all sorts of problems. So what I like to do is I like to look at people from little kids, and some of you may have seen this on the internet, but it's like, how many of you ever seen this one, Kids' Views on Marriage? Anybody seen this? Nobody's seen this. Okay, nobody's on the internet here. But anyway, there's a little thing they ask kids their views on marriage. So these are people, just take them 30 years later on how they're going to deal with life. But just listen to this. It's the first question they ask of Alan, who's only 10 years old. They asked him, how do you decide who to marry? And he said, you've got to find somebody who likes the same stuff. Like if you like sports, she should like it that you like sports, and she should keep the chips and dip coming. By the way, if you want this guy's name for your daughter so you don't go out with him, I don't think you want to do that. So keep that in mind. Here was another one. How do you decide who to marry? And this is from Kristen, who's age 10. No person really decides before they grow up who they're going to marry. God decides it all the way before, and then you get to find out later who you're stuck with. You know. Anybody have one of those in there? No, don't raise your hand. I don't want to know. What is the right age to get married? And this is from Freddie, who's age 6. No age is good to get married at. You've got to be a fool to get married. So. By the way, I met him later. He's been divorced 8 times, so just with that in mind. What do you think your mom and dad have in common? And this is from Lori, who's age 8. Both don't want any more kids. And you see this little kid, you know, flying the plane, pushing the stuff like this. And I told him, I said, don't touch any buttons. You know, I was getting a little nervous there. But because of that, I can remember the pilot's name. I can remember the flight attendants. I can remember everything about it like it was yesterday. I can remember the passengers scared to death this guy was going to fly. So it all came to fruition at that point. So the question is, and we're going to look at this a little bit, what are you doing every day to make every interaction positive, memorable, and special? So if you can remember that acronym, PMS, positive, memorable, and special. Nobody got that, but I think I'll just move on from that one. And the problem we have when we try to be more positive, memorable, and special is a lot of us don't see how we come across. We wonder why sometimes people are mad at us or upset at us, and we think we're doing the right things. You ever have somebody who says, well, that person talks too much, or that person's arrogant, and you know the person saying it is what? Is doing the exact same things all the way through. So it reminds me of another situation. How many of you ever gone into an elevator and you just put you don't look at anybody in the elevator? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Does anybody do light, or just me? Yeah, and you just look at the ground or the ceiling or the floor. Anybody like that? And I was in this elevator a while ago, and to show you how people don't see themselves, I was standing up here. Here's the elevator door. I did not know if anybody was in there at all, because my mind was on something else. And all of a sudden, I started doing this. I started going, I started coughing really loud. I did not have my hand in front of my mouth. And all of a sudden, this woman in back screamed, and she says, my mother taught me, when you cough, you put your hand over your mouth. And she yelled at me like that. Now, what's your first reaction when somebody does that? You want to, except I wrote this book called Get Along, so I can't do that. But immediately I calmed down, and I said to her, I said, you know what, I said, I really appreciate you saying, I was really calm, I appreciate you saying that, because quite frankly, that's how I got this cough. I don't want to give it to anybody else, and I want to thank you for sharing that information. And she immediately calmed down, and guess what she said next? She said, you know what, you are so nice. But guess what she said after that? She says, when I tell people what I just told you in the nice way that I told you, they start yelling and screaming at me. And then she asked me this question. She says, what's their problem? Now, I didn't have time to pull out my slides and all that, but in her mind, she thought she was talking to me in a what? In a nice way. And a lot of times when I do mediations, or I'll do interactions with people, because I mediate some things too, and I'll work with people individually, they'll say, well, I told them that. They'll wonder, why is everybody mad at me? Or why does this not work? And they'll say, well, I said that in a nice way. I said, let me hear your nice way. So you got to really watch out for some of those things as you're going through that. No, he ain't. And so how do you make sure you come across as more approachable, likable, and trustworthy? And there's a little acronym called SOFTEN. And so yell at, what do you think? To make yourself more approachable, likable, and trustworthy, the S would be what? Smile. Okay, there you go. Smile. And when I say smile, a couple things I want to say, first of all, if you do not normally smile, don't start doing it all of a sudden, okay? Because people wonder what you're up to. You go back to work, you start smiling, they say, why is that guy smiling again? I do not know. So make sure you watch out for that. Also, smile only when appropriate. You ever watch the news shows sometimes, and the guy says there were 5 dead in Fallujah, and they're smiling. It's sort of like a nervous reaction that comes across. Also, since a lot of you are on the phone, how do you make sure your smile comes across on the phone? Anybody? Pardon? Smile? Yeah, I can smile on the phone. Smile does come across, but what we can do to make sure we do that? Anybody? I don't hear it. Okay, what you might want to consider doing, and I've done this with a lot of companies. One company, well, I won't mention the name, but their complaints went down about 47% because of this one thing that we did. We put mirrors next to every person's desk at that company, and when they got on the phone, guess what they had to do? The phone would go ring, 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 ring. Good morning, how are you? They had to smile into the phone. Everybody said, oh, they're so nice and so pleasant. I don't know if they did their work better, but they came across as better in that area. So the first thing on that list, make yourself more approachable, likable, trustworthy, is to smile. Second thing, what would be the O? Anyone take a guess? Body language-wise? Giving you a hint? Open, yeah, open. There we go. And open. And how many of you do this as a habit? Okay, some of you are doing it now more even, but anyway. Okay, this innocently could just mean I'm cold, right? This innocently could mean I'm comfortable this way. But we've heard that term, perception is reality. Everybody's heard that, which is not necessarily true. Perception is not reality. Perception is your reality and your reality. But people perceive this a lot of times as closed and arrogant. And you know how you want to tell something? You ever gone to a store and somebody just looks a little like this and you say, you know what, I'm just going to walk away. Also, you got to realize with your clients and people you're dealing with too, about 60% of the American public has a tendency to be shy to an extent. And when you're a little shy, what do? When somebody's not that approachable, you do what? You just walk away. It's not even worth it. Now, one of the things we got to also watch out is when we do email or we send out messages. The words make a difference. One word can change the whole meaning of something, right? You ever send something out to somebody and they get the whole different impression because of the word you use? And let me just show you some slides. These are actually some signs that I want to show you right now of where a word got messed up. For example, take a look at this first one. Welcome to Washington, D.C., a work-free drug place. Now, what does that mean? Do you work free and get drugs? I don't know. Maybe that's... Some of you looking at me saying, well, that's right, isn't it? So anyway, it just depends where you're from. But by the way, I just want to mention, this sign had been up for 2 years. This sign had been up for 2 years before anybody figured it out. And so just amazing on that one. This was for a car dealer in Houston. I saw this. I just pulled it out of the paper, but I put it on a little sign here. This is how they were advertising. Look at this one. It says, why go anywhere and get cheated when you can come here? By the way, if you want to use that for travelers or no. Yeah, anybody wants to use that, I think it's open. So nobody's taking it, but no. Or another one here is danger falling rocks, and then it says handicap parking. I mean, what is the meaning behind that one? Oh, here's a good one. Sorry, we're open. Yeah, put that in front of your office door sometimes. Here's one to get rid of your kids, by the way, if you don't want them. Soccer not allowed. Soccer may only be played in the archery range. Things like that. And that's where you look at, this is a big one. Do people trust you one way or the other? And how do they trust you when you first meet them? Soften, S-O-F-T-E-M. On that case. How do they trust you on the long run? Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to. Some of the things that we're talking about here too. By the way, when we talk about trust, trust isn't just when you're at work. Trust is when you're out in the community too. People determine whether to trust you or not. For example, I was doing a workshop a while ago, and they rented a country club for everybody for the whole staff. And in the morning, I did my session, but in the afternoon, people played golf, they played tennis, they got to swim. They did everything. And does anybody play golf in here at all? Anybody? Little few of you? Well, I went out to play golf with the CEO of the company, a vendor, and somebody else. And talking about the level of trust that you got to look at. When you play golf, one of the things when you play golf, whenever you hit the ball, wherever it goes, you need to do what? You need to hit it where it lands, right? Well, we're playing golf, and the first hole, the vendor had a badge, didn't like where it was. So he asked the rest of us, he says, do you mind if I pick up the ball and move it? And I'm sort of just a hired help, so I said, okay, fine. So he just moves it, and then he hits it again. He didn't like it. He says, I'm just going to move it again. He does it again. About the fifth hole, he comes up and he hits it again, and he doesn't like where it was, and he doesn't say anything. He just picks it up and he actually moves it right near the hole. And about the seventh hole, the CEO of the company comes over to me and says, Arnold, can I talk to you for a minute? So we walk over for a minute, walk away, and he says, you're this expert on communication and getting along and all that kind of good stuff. And he says, the vendor's name was Jim, and he says, Arnold, tell me the truth. Do you trust, in your opinion, do you trust Jim? And I had no clue what he was talking about because I'm playing golf. But in his mind, he says, if he's moving that ball around all the time, do you think he's doing something else there too? You know how the actions have to fit in to that area. I'll give you one more example on this too of how you show trust. When your kid turns 13, they turn into adults at restaurants. Anybody know what I'm talking? They don't turn into adults, but they get charged as adults. And I was going out with a father who had a son who just turned 13. We're going in a restaurant. I had my son with me. We're going in the restaurant, and he tells the cashier, my son just turned 13, so this is what he said to the cashier: I want 2 adult meals. And you know what the cashier said? She says, you know, sir, since he just turned 13, I'm going to let it go and let him in for under 13 because she said, who will know? And you know why I trust this dad so much? Because guess what he said? He says, because my son will know. And you know why I trust him even more? Because I'm still trying to get my 20-year-old in for under 12. But anyway, besides. But before I leave you with this, I'd like to leave you with a couple thoughts. And the first one there is from Maya Angelou, who said this: people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So really, that'll cover all. That'll get you in a lot of good shape no matter what you do or how good you are on this thing. And I love this quote at the end too, because it's really about your attitude. It's about being positive. It's about being upbeat. Because what did we say before? People like people in good spirits. You're just going to get so much farther in life if you think about that. And a quote by Mahatma Gandhi who said this. He said, keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your actions. Keep your actions positive because your actions become your habits. Guard your habits and keep them positive because your habits become your values. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. And he ended up by saying that every day is a new beginning, and you must always remember that the nurtured seed always produces the abundant harvest. So again, I want to thank you for having me, and I'll see you up there. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Arnold. That was great, and I want to thank you for a wonderful start to our conference day. I just want to make the observation, I hope that the man that kept moving his ball on the golf course wasn't your accountant.